Hey Archerfish Tank, I got some fiddler crabs and introduced them into the tank a couple weeks ago. I want to show you a little bit about their first meeting with the archerfish, their first meeting with the frog. Everybody's getting along and they're a great addition to Archerfish Tank. Let me show it to you. I released the crab onto the big rock, hoping that he'd pose for the camera, but he's got a mind of his own and jumped straight into the water. Crab number 2 was much more accommodating. When I released him, he stayed up on the rock, took his time, and tasted the water. It's easy to recognize a fiddler crab because of that great big claw. Look how big the big claw is compared to the small one. And only males have that big claw. A female has 2 small ones. Fiddler crabs are semi-terrestrial crabs, which means that they can live both on the land and underwater. They have gills that allow them to breathe air and breathe water. And so they can spend days at a time above the water, and they can spend days at a time underwater. And in fact, they need to switch back and forth in between. They don't want to spend all of their time under the water, and they don't want to spend all of their time on the land. This Archerfish tank is very well suited for these crabs because the aquascaping and rock formations allow them to spend as much time underwater and as much time on dry ground as they'd like. The crabs are very curious. They peek into and prod every little hole and nook and cranny in the tank, passing inside and under the caves. They search out every hole looking for food and detritus. They eat anything that the fish leave behind. Little crabs like this are part of the cleanup crew in the aquarium. They go into all the nooks and crannies and clean up the messes that otherwise you couldn't get. For example, this little crab had only been in the tank for a few minutes when he went into this cave, and when he came back out, he was dragging a little white ball of fluff. Hey fish, get out of the way. That white ball of fluff is actually mouse hair. It was left in there from snake droppings. Thanks to the crab, I was able to reach in there and pull that out with my tweezers. Semi-terrestrial crabs like fiddler crabs have gills in a chamber inside their bodies at the base of their legs. While they're underwater, they keep the chamber open, but they can seal the chamber to keep water inside while they're on the land. As long as their gills are kept moist, they can stay out of the water for as long as they want. The fountain coming up out of the big rock and spilling water over it makes a nice environment for these crabs. And the archerfish are very interested in those crabs walking around on the rocks. Here's Tim practicing his shots, and he needs the practice. The fiddler crabs do the same thing outside the water that you saw them doing inside the water earlier. They shove themselves into every crack and hole, searching for spare bits of food that might be crammed in there. Something interesting about crabs, and it's true with these fiddler crabs, is that they can regrow lost legs or claws. Crabs molt, which means they shed their outside shell as they grow. So if a crab loses a leg, he just has to walk around with a missing leg until his next molt, because when he molts that old shell, the leg will reappear. And it's the same with those claws too. Even if a fiddler crab loses his big claw, he can grow that back. Here you can see how the fiddler crab got its name. During feeding, the small claw moves so that it looks like the crab is playing its large claw like a fiddle. Fiddler crabs like to make a burrow in the gravel or in the sand. They stay in there to be protected after molting. Just after they've molted, their shell is soft, and until it hardens, they need a place where they can be protected. Also, a female will stay in the male's burrow to incubate her eggs. Several of the tank inhabitants had early encounters with the fiddler crabs and had to learn that the crabs are not food. This platy just needed the crab to wave its claw around a little bit, and it was smart enough to stay away. The aquatic frog that I have in my tank had a different experience with the crab. Now, these crabs are mostly peaceful and just want to be left alone. This was the first time the frog had ever seen the crab, and it was a little bit aggressive with it. The crab does wave his claw around, trying to warn the frog away, but the frog keeps coming back until the crab kind of gives him a little pinch. This definitely looks painful enough to teach the frog to stay away from that crab from now on, but he does let him go immediately. Again, the crab just wants to be left alone, and it looks to me like the frog learned its lesson. It has been several weeks. The frog is still alive. He's just fine. He doesn't go near the crabs anymore, though. So they are compatible and doing okay. One more first encounter was with the archerfish. Now, the archerfish eat shrimp. You can see a piece of shrimp right above the crab hanging on the rock. And you'll notice that its claw actually looks a lot like that piece of shrimp. So it's not too surprising that the archerfish would get a little confused. If we slow that down a little, it is amazing how powerful those archerfish are. He just ripped that crab right off the rock. Now, there's nothing to worry about. Crab's just fine. He has to spend the next little while defending himself and teaching the fish to stay away from him and that he's not their food, and they learn that. Everybody comes out of this encounter just fine. Well, the fish will pick at him a few times, testing to see if he's something for them, and he will climb up that leaf and wave his claw at them, and pretty soon here he'll stick his leg out like a spear and keep defending himself away from all the fish that are circling and circling him like sharks. I like how he sticks that leg out like a spear. He uses his claw to point. He's like ninja crab up there on the tip of that leaf. The crab is very well armored and much, much stronger than an insect that these fish are used to eating. And he can handle this with no problem. Crabs can actually swim, so as soon as he gets a little break from the attacks and the fish are gone, he swims away. Well, that was a very exciting exchange between the archerfish and the crabs. That was several weeks ago. Here is the fiddler crab today. It still hangs out on the edge of the rock, and the archerfish have learned that it's not food, and they don't bother it anymore. They live in peace and harmony and joy and happiness in the fish tank. In fact, in one frame, we can see one of the crabs, the frog, and the fish all doing great. And why not let that be our inspirational message today? Maybe there's someone in our lives who we're having difficulty getting along with. Maybe we've even had a little contention with them. Or maybe a lot of contention. In any case, we can take a lesson from the creatures that live in Archerfish Tank and maybe see if we could reach outside our world and learn to live in peace. Thanks so much for watching today. Hey, remember to click buttons. Click the like button, click the subscribe button, and leave happy, positive comments. Thanks, guys. I'm Jared Wood. This is Archerfish Tank. Reach outside your world.